Hi everyone, and welcome to the fourth Masterworks concert of the season, which we are calling American Rhapsody, and it's centered around sort of celebrating the centennial of Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, which will conclude this festive American concert. Here you can see the artwork behind me. I'm joining you for today from the gallery on the second floor of the Koger Center for the Arts, our home for all of the Masterworks concert every season, of course. So we'll go ahead and start with the second half of the program. So the second half of the program features what I'm really looking forward to is our first collaboration with pianist Laura Downs, who is based in, I believe, in Sacramento, California, but she tours all over the states, all over the world, performing concertos, giving recitals. But for the last few years, she has been taking on this huge project of introducing all of these gems, piano music solo pieces by neglected composers, women composers of color, both living present and from the past as well. She's won a lot of renown for her recording projects featuring those works. And also, she's been very active in commissioning new pieces, including a whole slate of works for solo piano and orchestra. So we are actually going to be playing two pieces with Laura, and one of them is our sort of premiere, South Carolina premiere, one such project of her new venture. And so a few years ago, she had the idea of commissioning somebody to sort of refashion a few of the greatest songs written by the jazz great Billy Strayhorn, who was famous for his collaboration with Duke Ellington in his lifetime. Actually, for instance, Duke Ellington's famous tune like Take the A Train, for instance, was actually composed by Strayhorn. And Ellington and Strayhorn worked together for many years, created many great works. But she wanted to take three of the songs that Strayhorn wrote and have it sort of refashioned and reimagined, if you would, as a piece for solo piano and orchestra. So we were approached about for being a part of what we call consortium for this. You know, nowadays when composers write a new piece or when somebody gets commissioned a new piece of work like this, oftentimes it takes several partners, other orchestras and presenters to sort of form what we call consortium to make it a reality. So this was initiated by Laura, and it was really spearheaded by the Boston Pops, who premiered a work a couple years ago, I think in 2022, during their summer season, as well as the Philadelphia Orchestra. So those two were sort of the leaders, if you would, for this consortium. And there are other orchestras, including us, around the country who became part of this consortium. So we're very much looking forward to presenting this and sharing it with you for this. The reason why this whole idea of the Strayhorn, the commission with Laura came about was a few years ago, and I think this was actually, might have been just before the pandemic, or at least, I knew it was before the pandemic. I think it might have been like the winter of 2019, so like year before maybe the pandemic or something like this. I had a chance to meet Laura in Spokane, Washington. So I've been working there, as some of you know, for a long time, almost 20 years. And I was back doing a concert. When I was back there, Thomas Hampson, a renowned baritone, who he grew up in Spokane, Washington. So Spokane claims, you know, Tom as one of its own. He was back in town presenting the project he was working on at the time, which was really centered, sort of telling the story of America as a nation and its history through songs. and sort of going through in time in a way. And Laura was the pianist for that project, and there were a few other musicians that came travel with Tom, as well as a few of the local musicians from the symphony who kind of formed this chamber ensemble to do this incredible concert. After the concert, I had a chance to kind of hang out with Tom and also with Laura as well. And so that's sort of how this connection happened. And I was sort of keeping in touch with her and her agent as well. So when we found out about this opportunity to be a part of this consortium for the Strayhorn suite, we thought, let's do this. So the whole project, of course, because of COVID, got delayed by a couple of years. So now I'm just so excited that we finally get to present this with Laura. The suite itself, I mean, it's a refashioning of 3 of Strayhorn songs. So it's not like a full concerto, like lasting half an hour or anything like this. It's like 14 minutes or so. So it makes sense to then have Laura play something else too. And so this is also a perfect opportunity for us to work together on Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. The reason for this is because when it was first performed, it was February 12th, 1924. So it's basically almost exactly 100 years later. At this concert, we get to sort of perform the Gershwin together. Rhapsody in Blue, of course, is it's one of the most iconic pieces written, not just by Gershwin, but any American composer or any composer really. It's anybody who's flown United Airlines, to this day they still use Rhapsody in Blue as their theme music in their like pre-flight announcement and so on. What's interesting is how this piece came about. So the first performance with Gershwin playing the solo part and Paul Whiteman's band played it was first performed in sort of piano with jazz band version rather than with full orchestra. So that happened on February 12th, 1924. He started working on the piece on like January 7th of that year. So he basically worked on it. I think it's just like precisely like January 7th, he started working on it literally. Finished it, I think, on February 3rd. So you might ask, why did he just put it off sort of, till the last minute? Well, the famous story is that Gershwin didn't realize that he was supposed to be writing this piece. So on January 3rd, still the same year, January 3rd, 1924, he was, George Gershwin was hanging out with his brother Ira and somebody else, I think. And just, at a pool hall, just 3 guys just hanging out. And Ira was reading the copy of the New York Tribune and came upon an announcement. Said on February 12th, Paul Whiteman and his big band or his band will present this groundbreaking fusion of jazz and classical music, and it's going to feature a new piano concerto by George Gershwin. So Ira, his brother, reads this, says, "George, take a look at this. Do you know anything about this?" And George says, "Not that I recall." So the next day on January 4th, George called Paul Whiteman on the phone and said, "So wait, did I miss something, or am I supposed to be writing something for you to be performed, in about 5 weeks?" And Whiteman said, "Oh yeah, well, yes, I was going to tell you about it." What had happened apparently was that Paul Whiteman had been planning to do this big concert, featuring a new piece by Gershwin, and to showcase really sort of. So this is 1920s. Jazz was the hot thing at the moment, but he wanted to really showcase sort of this fusion, if you would, of jazz and traditional symphonic music. And he had been sort of but he was kind of keeping this idea a little bit of a secret. And he had been planning to do this few months down the road, like sometime further in the future. Well, it turned out he, at the time, had sort of a rival in the industry, and his rival kind of decided to put on the music program with a similar concept, sort of this mirroring the sort of the ever popular jazz at the time, with symphonic sound. So Paul Whiteman, not to be outdone, he decided to make his concert happen a lot sooner than he had originally intended. And so he apologized to Gershwin, of course, and asked Gershwin, basically, you can do it. You can still write this, right? So Gershwin thought about this for a day. He said, there were a few conditions. He said, sure, I can write something new, but he said, don't expect, I don't have, he was involved he was busy with another project at the time. So Gershwin said, okay, instead of a multi-movement concerto, can I just write a Rhapsody, let's say, sort of a single movement work, shorter, like 18 minutes rather than like half an hour. Maybe, I should be able to do that. So Whiteman said, yeah, sure, that's fine. And another condition that was that Gershwin, a very typical of, and it's true to this day as well, when you think about people who write for film, like in Hollywood, people who write film soundtracks, or at the time, this was also true, people who were writing musicals, like Broadway musicals. Oftentimes, the composers didn't do their own orchestrations. The theaters or studios have at their disposal a whole team of orchestrators who will take the composer's sort of a shorthanded notation and some basic instructions as to if they have specific ideas on give this melodic line to flute, that kind of thing. They're all sort of done in shorthand score format. And the orchestrators then will take those ideas and flesh everything out. Otherwise, the composers were just busy, writing one show after another. Or in the case of, today, film composers, a lot of them, they also employ a team of orchestrators who can bring out some of the underscoring and some of the cues that might not be the biggest moments in the scores are really orchestrated by the team of orchestrators rather than the composers themselves. So Gershwin said, I'm not going to have time to orchestrate, so I'll write down all the ideas. Can you have somebody orchestrate for me? So Whiteman just happened to have an in-house for the Paul Whiteman, his orchestra. He had an in-house arranger and orchestrator. That was none other than Grofé, who wrote the Grand Canyon Suite that we performed at the beginning of the season. So Grofé was tasked with, basically Grofé talks about how they ended up sort of working in this house. Gershwin had an upright piano in one room, and he was furiously trying to test out different ideas and kind of making a very shorthanded notations of different ideas from Rhapsody in Blue. And then Grofé would be waiting in the next room, and he was literally waiting for the next page to come in from Gershwin, and then he would flesh it out and assign to the orchestra. So that's how that whole process kind of played out. As far as how did the title come about, so Rhapsody in Blue, apparently that was sort of came out on the whim. So Ira and George were at an art exhibit, and you know how sometimes artists will have rather abstract titles, a study in black and gray or something like this, but the paintings themselves are not abstract, but the titles sometimes are very generic or abstract. And they came upon this exhibit with basically many titles that were of that ilk. And so Ira thought, oh, why don't we call it it's a Rhapsody, because that's what George initially called it. So he said, well, it's a Rhapsody, why don't we just say Rhapsody in Blue? And then, it's a play on word, because blues then has a jazz connotation and kind of plays right into the sort of the kind of piece that they were trying to get at. So that's how the title Rhapsody in Blue came about. Many of you are probably familiar with how the piece opens, with this just out of nothing comes this clarinet solo, starts out low, and it starts with this trill. And then here's this big gliss, the glissando or slide, all the way up to just going through like a huge range of this slide, and then the piece really begins. Well, that slide or the gliss was not in the original manuscript. Turned out once they started rehearsing this ahead of the premiere, apparently during the rehearsal break, the clarinetist in the Paul Whiteman's group was just kind of messing around, and he thought, well, okay, I could just play this as a regular just scale, just without the slide, just go up the scale as it was notated. But then one time he was testing something out, and he thought, well, what if I actually do this really like funny slide up the thing? So he did it, and the Gershwin happened to hear it. And then he thought, wait, what was that? Do it again. So the guy does it again, and Gershwin decided, actually, that sounds great, let's just keep that in there. So that was a tradition for basically everybody to do this with the famous slide at the beginning of the piece, sort of happened that way. Kind of came out of somebody just kind of messing around a little bit in the rehearsal. So so Laura and we will be playing those two pieces, the Strayhorn Suite as well as Gershwin Rhapsody in Blue, in the second half of the program. In the first half of the program, we are going to open with a couple pieces that you might not be familiar with, but they're both American. And so to start out, we go back to like the mid-19th century and play you a piece by Louis Gottschalk. And Gottschalk was he was born in New Orleans in 1829. He actually died in Brazil in 1869. But he grew up in New Orleans. His father was Jewish and his mother was Creole. And when he was young, he basically knew a lot of relatives on his mother's side of the family. So there were he grew up with, a lot of like Haitian culture in his youth, the food and of course music as well. So when he was little, and he started learning the piano when he was young, and he was apparently considered a piano prodigy when he was young. But he also here developed his love for percussion, sort of the different styles of dance and sort of traditional music from Latin America, by extension from Africa as well, that he wanted to incorporate in his own music also. So interestingly, he actually worked for several years in Europe, and he was essentially responsible in that mid part of the 19th century to introduce American music, his original music, also sort of the style of sort of the traditional music, or music inspired by traditional music of Latin America, to European audiences. By spending a few years being a very sort of popular piano virtuoso who was touring, giving recitals, concerts. Apparently both Chopin and Liszt, so sort of the two opposing giants of piano virtuosity and piano writing in the Romantic era, they both very much enjoyed Gottschalk's artistry as well. Interesting enough, he did that. Initially, he went to Europe, wanting to study at the Paris Conservatory, but he wasn't accepted. But he decided, well, you know, he was already over there, so why then? He wanted to play, so he started playing, and then people took notice of him, and you know, that's how his fame kind of started. A few years later, he moved back to the U.S. And apparently he gave, I mean, nowadays, you know, there are many musicians, soloists, chamber musicians and concerto soloists or recitalists, instrumentalists, singers, but, you know, many instrumentalists who sort of zigzags this, you know, huge nation of ours, you know, to give a very busy concert schedule. Apparently Gottschalk had a very similarly tight schedule without the benefit of today's travel. So, you know, today's air travel and all these things. I mean, he apparently traveled by rail, miles, thousands and thousands of miles in a given year to give recitals and concerts in many different communities around the country. So he was really sort of the one of the first traveling virtuosos, giving concerts in small towns, the towns, big cities also, but small towns, communities all around the U.S. He also composed a lot of pieces, of course. Finding, you know, I don't know how he found the time to compose outside of his busy performing schedule, but he did. And so we're going to perform, it's a movement taken from his first symphony. So his first symphony it's titled A Night in the Tropics, and we are going to play for you the second movement. There are only two movements in this symphony. The second movement is this very festive, percussive movement called Festa Criolla. And so we are going to be opening the concert with Festa Criolla, which is sort of done, it almost sounds like, well, the traditional dance form that he used here was called bambula. So bambula originated in West Africa, but also went to Haiti. And of course, he was intimately familiar with sort of the musical traditions of Haiti. And musically, it's somewhat similar to samba from Brazil. So it's very, you know, it's very rhythmic, very, you know, a lot of fun. Bambula, the name comes from the fact that to play bambula, apparently they use these traditional drums or percussion instruments made of bamboo. Basically, it's the same bamboo they were using as a rum cask. So it was rum barrels. And then they would actually, you know, turn like the old rum barrels into drums, and then, you know, strike it to create some of the rhythmic foundation for this dance. So he kind of creates that same idea in this piece. A couple years ago, I heard a very unique, kind of a very, very fun version of this piece in which the orchestra, of course, played the original parts by Gottschalk for Festa Criolla, but this orchestra added the local percussion group of children or of youth, and using a lot of different steel pans. So it's like a steel drum band with orchestra playing this festive piece by Gottschalk. Then I thought, you know, this would be interesting. So I kind of stole that idea. So we're gonna be doing the same thing here. And so joining the Philharmonic will be the students from Duryea High School. They have a standing steel drum band. And their director is Chris Lee, who is our principal percussionist. So I'm looking forward to kind of having a big band in a way on stage to open this American Rhapsody concert I think you're going to have a lot of fun listening to it as well. The remainder of the first half is devoted to a composer whose name might not be familiar to many of you. Her name was Margaret Bonds. She grew up in Chicago and was a pianist also. She was considered a piano virtuoso, but also wanted to compose. She was taking piano lessons from some of the famous pianists in Chicago area. In the 30s, she attended the Northwestern University, where she got her bachelor's degree, I think also master's. And then from there, she went to the Juilliard School, where she studied composition with some of the renowned composition faculty members at Juilliard. When she was at Northwestern, it was still kind of segregated. So, for instance, she talks about how she couldn't use the library on campus or the practice room. So she would spend a lot of time at the basement of the Evanston Public Library in Evanston, Illinois. That's where Northwestern campus is, of course. So there, then she came upon sort of spending a lot of time at the public library. She came upon the writings of Langston Hughes, and became very much some of that writing really resonated with her. Later, she would collaborate for many years with Langston Hughes, writing musical theater works or operas based on Hughes' writing, and so on. So she went to Juilliard and then started working as a composer. She's probably best known now she made some great arrangements of traditional spirituals for solo piano that I think a lot of people play. She also wrote, her interests and her output were very sort of versatile. So she, from original pieces to musical theater works to sort of jazz-influenced works, arrangements of spirituals, film scores, and so on, works for dance and so on. What is unfortunate is when she died in 1971, and by the time, I think shortly before her death, she had relocated to LA. But she died, I think, unexpectedly. And the reason why we haven't had chance to really perform or hear a lot of her music, especially her ensemble music for orchestras, chamber music, and so on, is because nobody knew where her manuscript was located. Apparently, her family found all these boxes of her manuscripts on the verge of being thrown out, basically, after her death. Her daughter has saved all 10 boxes of Margaret Bond's music. But then when her daughter also passed away, I think in 2011 or something like this, then basically nobody had the rights, or nobody really claimed Margaret Bond's estate, and she was not signed on with one of these big publishers during her lifetime. So all of these different turns of events, essentially what happened was some researchers from Georgetown University came upon these boxes. Again, they were about to be thrown out once again, and realized what these were. So now I think Georgetown University houses all of her manuscripts now. And there are a few musicologists and composers who basically have been sort of curating and editing her music. So the piece you're going to hear, which is called Montgomery Variations, is one such piece. People knew this piece existed, but after her death, nobody knew where the music was. And I don't think this piece was actually performed during her lifetime, really. Margaret Bonds visited Montgomery, Alabama on her tour, on a sort of this musical theater group that she was touring with. few years after she finished the piece, she added the dedication of this piece. She dedicates, it's now dedicated to Martin Luther King Jr. And it basically is the sort of, it's in 7 movements. It's variations on a spiritual, but it kind of almost runs like a film score. So it has 7 sort of a free form variations on the spiritual. It starts out with these leaders, including Martin Luther King, deciding that, you know what, these people will not take the bus to work anymore if they're going to continue to be segregated on the bus. So there is the whole decision, and they pray about their decision, and there's a movement called March. So it's literally all these workers in Montgomery, Alabama, they're now walking to work rather than taking the bus, and it's sort of a stirring moment. And then there's the tragedy of the church bombing that happens that claimed the lives of several children, and there's a lament that follows it, but then it ends on a hopeful and uplifting note with a benediction that is really a prayer for peace, peace among all people on this earth, regardless of our differences. And so it ends on a very uplifting note, and it's a gorgeous piece. I mean, it's like I said, it's almost it sounds like there should be a film to go with it. Like it's in 7 short sections, and it's lasting about 22 minutes in length. So 7 short scenes basically that you can kind of imagine. And she does provide a sort of a scene description, if you would, for each of these 7 sections of this piece. And there's a brand new edition of this. Again, thanks to those researchers at Georgetown University, there's a brand new edition of this piece that became available within the last 2 years or so. So now you see orchestras around the country, including us, and orchestras like LA Phil, Boston Symphony, San Francisco Symphony as well, and then smaller orchestras around the country as well, being able to share this incredible piece with our audiences. And I hope you enjoy it as well. So it's a journey. It's American Rhapsody is the title of the concert. It starts out, of course, in the mid 18th century with this festive, percussive Festa Criolla by Louis Gottschalk, and then ending up with a very recent, reimagining of Billy Strayhorn songs that was commissioned by Laura Downs, of course, with one of the American classics in the Rhapsody in Blue, as well as this hidden gem in Montgomery Variations by Margaret Bonds. I think you're in for a huge treat. We're very much looking forward to working with Laura and sharing this incredible concert with all of you.